In this Sikha Vayakhel-Pekudei, the Rebbe is going to be having a look both on a Rashi in Vayakhel and in a Rashi in Pekudei, and we'll also see how one actually helps us understand the other as well. In Parshas Vayakhel, we have a pasuk. It says, "V'chol hanoshim asher naso libo noisano," all of the women that were specifically inspired with wisdom. Tavu es ha'izim, they had spun es ha'izim, the goats. What does this mean? Rashi says this was a special umnus, a special craftsmanship. Shemi al gabe ha'izim tavu noisan, they would actually spin the wool or the hair of the goats as it was on the backs of the goats. The Rebbe asks, number one, what is the advantage of this? Why is that so great that it's being spun while on the backs of the goats? And number two, the Rebbe says, if they did this for the goats, why didn't they do it with the wool on the backs of the sheep? The wool that they would be making, the Chelek and the argamon, the blue wool, the purple wool, etc. In Parshas Pekudei, we have a Rashi that says that when Moshe Rabbeinu tells Betzalel to make the kelim for the Mishkan and then tells him to make the Mishkan, Betzalel says, it is customary in the world that we usually make the house first and then the furnishings. And Moshe Rabbeinu agrees that yes, this is actually the way Hashem commanded to do it, and this is what he ends up doing. The question then is, if we're building the Mishkan in the regular way how people build houses, why is it then that in Parshas Vayakhel we find that the ariyos, the tapestries, which is the roof, is being made before the crushing, before the boards? Usually the custom would be, the normal way would be that you first make the walls and then you make the roof. The Rebbe quotes the Bali HaTosfos that answer this question by saying that they wanted to ensure that there's no delay at all from when the krushim are made and placing the ariyos on top of them. That's why they have to have the ariyos ready to go. But the Rebbe asks, seemingly they're anyways not going to be putting it up until the Mishkan is going to be set up, which will be after all the different parts of the Mishkan are made anyways. So what's the advantage of making the ariyos before making the boards? In order to understand all of this, the Rebbe looks at some other diyukim, details within Rashi. Number one, the Rebbe says, if Rashi is trying to explain this idea that they spun the wool, the goat's hair, on the backs of the goats, Rashi should seemingly start with explaining that point. Why does Rashi start off by saying, he hoisa umnus, he say that this was a special craftsmanship? Another thing, says the Rebbe, why this expression of umnus, workmanship or craftsmanship, rather than saying a chachma yisera? That's actually the word that the pasuk says, all of the women that had chachma. Also in the Gemara, which is seemingly the source of Rashi, also uses this expression, that it was chachma yisera, extra wisdom. Why is Rashi using this idea of umnus yisera? So the Rebbe explains. When the pasuk says tavu es ha'izim, and it says it as a separate pasuk to the spinning of the materials of the sheep, etc., of the Chelek and so on, so it's clear that we're speaking about a different type of spinning to the other materials. So what does it mean tavu es ha'izim? They spun the izim. It obviously doesn't mean they're spinning the goats. Clearly they're spinning the hair or the wool that's on the goats. And since again it's being said separately, it must mean that since it says tavu es ha'izim, it means es ha'izim means that it's being spun while it's attached to the goats. What would be the advantage of that? The advantage is very simple, the Rebbe says. It's quite clear that when we give a donation of something that's alive, of an animal, just like a carbon, when it comes from an animal, it's going to be more chashuv, greater, more important than something that's coming only from a plant. And therefore, when they're going to spin this wool, spin this hair while it's still attached to the animal, to the goat, it's going to be considered a more chashuv, a greater type of donation. Especially, says the Rebbe, the way it would seem simply is they actually brought this spun hair, the spun wool from the goats, they brought it as it was still attached to the goats. They brought living goats to be brought as the donation. So now they're literally donating something of a balchai, of an animal. The Rebbe says now this will also help us understand why they're only doing this with the goats and not doing it with the sheep. Because the wool that had to be coming from the sheep always had to be dyed wool. It had to be dyed with Chelek and argamon and the various different things that you wouldn't be able to do while it's attached to the sheep. And therefore they're also not spinning it on the sheep because anyways they're not going to be able to bring it as it's attached to the sheep. Now again, all of this we can understand from the pasuk. It says it says tavu es ha'izim, means that they're spinning it on the sheep, on the goats, excuse me. So what's Rashi coming to add? Rashi is saying that it was a umnus yeseda. There was a special craftsmanship here. What he's saying is that it's not only that they gave it in a better way, that it's coming from the person, it's a better giving, it's a nicer donation, but there's also a better craftsmanship in the material itself, meaning it's going to come out better because it was attached to the sheep. Why is that? Because while it's still attached to the sheep, it's still living, it's still getting its nourishment, living off the sheep. So automatically it's going to be softer, it's going to be more moist, and therefore it's going to come out. The spun wool will come out in a much more beautiful way now. Says the Rebbe, based on all of this, well, now let's go back to making the yeriyos, the tapestries before the boards. And it's going to be because of both aspects of what we just said, of why the women are doing this. First of all, we said it's because the chavivus and the zrizus, because they are so excited and they want to go ahead and they want to do this mitzvah already. So they're doing it as it's on the sheep, and this is a special skill. But also we said the craftsmanship in the material itself is going to be better. So the Rebbe says, as far as this zrizus, that they wanted to do it quickly, so we're going to need to now cut off the hair, the spun wool from the goats immediately, and make the yeriyos before we go ahead and start making the adonim, the sockets, the krushim, the boards. Why? Because if we don't cut it off immediately off the goats, if we're not going to make the yeriyos immediately, then the hair is going to continue growing and it won't be spun together anymore, the new part that's just growing. Furthermore, the Rebbe says it's going to be tsar balei chayim. We're just leaving it on the goats for no good reason, this uncomfortable position of all of its hair spun together. That's as far as coming from the zrizus of the women. But furthermore, as far as the craftsmanship of the material itself, so just like spinning fresh, moist, soft threads is going to come out better, so too when they need to weave the tapestries, it's again going to be in a much better way if it's fresh, coming directly off the animals. And that's why the yeriyos are made first and not waiting till after the krushim are made. The Rebbe says from all of this, we also take out a fascinating area in halacha, which we can take from this Rashi. And the Rebbe explains, there's a question. How is it that the women are even allowed to spin the wool for the Mishkan? Why not? Building the Mishkan is considered a mitzvah saseh shazman grama, mitzvah saseh that's time related, because we're not allowed to build a Mishkan or Beis HaMikdash at night. Now there's an opinion that says if women are parted from a mitzvah, they can't even do the preparations for the mitzvah, like making a lulav or tzitzis and so on. So how could they be part of making the yeriyos? So the Rogatchover explains that in building the Beis HaMikdash, there's two aspects. There's the building itself, the mitzvah saseh, from which the women are definitely exempt. But then there's the idea we need to have a Beis HaMikdash or a Mishkan in order to bring karbonos. Now, the building, the mitzvah saseh of building, they're exempt. But to have a Beis HaMikdash or a Mishkan to bring karbonos, that they will be obligated because they also have karbonos to bring. So now let's apply this to the... So now, what's going to end up coming out is like this. The aspects of the Beis HaMikdash, which are absolutely crucial for the karbonos, those aspects, women are also going to be obligated. The aspects of the Beis HaMikdash or Mishkan which are not crucial, that the women wouldn't be allowed or wouldn't be supposed to be taking part of. So now let's apply this to the yeriyos. We have a pasuk. Moshe Rabbeinu spreads the oyel vayifros es oyel over the Mishkan. What does the oyel mean? So this is referring to the tapestries, to the yeriyos. The Gemara says it's referring to the lowest layer of the yeriyos. Those are the woolen yeriyos and the linen yeriyos. So since these are crucial for the Mishkan, they are the ones that are making it into an oil, into a tent. You can now bring karbonos. These are the ones that the women could be part of. Whereas the next layers up, the yeriyos made of the goat skin, the goat's hair, the women wouldn't be allowed because that's not really crucial and necessary for the Mishkan. So how could they actually take part of it? Says the Rogatchover, using the words of the Gemara, that this was considered a chachma, you say. It's not actually considered a malacha. That's why it says that this special way of spinning the wool, that's why they spun it in this special way. Because this special craft is called a special chachma. It's not a regular malacha, and therefore, because it's a special chachma, here they would be allowed to do it. It's not an ordinary malacha. But that's all according to the Gemara that says that the oil, vayifros es oil, is referring to the lowest level of the yeriyos. But Rashi in Chumash actually says Vayifros es oil is referring also to the yeriyos izim, to the yeriyos made of the goat skin. If that's the case, then those yeriyos are also necessary and crucial for the Mishkan to be a tent to be able to bring karbonos. And that follows then that the women would be able to and be chayiv to participate in it. And that's why over here, what does Rashi use? Not the word chachma, because it's not about a chachma. The women are doing a malacha. And that's why Rashi uses the term umnus, he said. It's actually a craft. The object itself is going to be made in a way of malacha, in a very different way now, because of what the women are doing, not only about a special chachma or a special skill, but this is the malacha. And that's why they could actually do it. It's actually based on this. The Rebbe moves on and discusses different opinions in the Gemara, whether one would be chayiv in this form of spinning on Shabbos, and what Rashi's opinion would be. We're not going to go into those details right now. The Rebbe finishes off with Hoyrois and Avodas Hashem, and the Rebbe says, why in fact did the women go ahead and spin the wool, the hair, while it was on the goats? There was no command from the Eibush that they have to do it this way. So the Rebbe says, because when someone has a special skill, a special talent, he needs to know that it wasn't given to him just for his own personal use, but he needs to utilize it to avodas Hashem, to make a mishkan, to make a place for Hashem. And the same thing applies to each and every one of us. When we have any sort of talent, any sort of skill, we always need to look for a way. How are we going to make the world a better place, a place for Hashem with this skill, using it for avodas Hashem? The same thing is true also when we have some extra earnings or profit. We need to use it for giving tzedakah. The Rebbe tells a story with a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. Anytime he had some extra money, he knew right away there must be a messenger around the corner coming from the Alter Rebbe to collect money for tzedakah. Another thing says the Rebbe, the lesson, from the fact that they removed the hair from the goats, immediately, one of the reasons we said was for Tzar Balei Chaim, says that if this is true, with Tzar Balei Chaim, that we're changing the minhag olam, the order of the way usually things would be done. We said usually the walls are made and then the roof. Here we're making the areas immediately not to cause extra pain to the animals. Says the Rebbe, how much more so not to cause and see another yid in pain. Especially when you see another yid that's, so to speak, naked, in pain, because he doesn't have tzitzis and tefillin, and you might think, well, there's the order of the world, how things need to be. The order of things need to be is first I need to take care of myself. I need to go daven and then go learn and then go eat breakfast, then go to my job. Then I'll start thinking about the other person. Says the Torah, no, when you see another yid in pain, especially a spiritual pain, you need to immediately ensure that he's not hungry, not thirsty, and not uncovered, rather that he has all the things that he needs in Torah and mitzvahs.